Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, Diablo 4 as we know it is changing drastically in a month and a half. Vessel of Hatred itself will of course be a very massive shift, but along with the expansion, whether you buy it or not, we get Season 6, and the stream just wrapped up talking about the PTR for Season 6 and Patch 2.0, which of course outlines all the major changes that are coming, and, well, for scale, let's just say that this is the longest developer stream that they have done so far for the game at any point, so let's just break the whole thing down into all of the important info, and as concise a way as I can, for those who'd rather just know what's going on without catching the whole stream. First things first, we had the big major systemic change for Season 6, which is being called Progression 2.0. In Season 4, the big change was legendaries and item upgrading. In Season 5, it was uniques. In Season 6, this big overhaul is to progression as a whole, and a lot of this is based around the idea of just diving into what really feels good in the game and sort of doubling down on it. This was expressed to us by sort of giving through examples of a new character progression path from level 1 to final end version of a build. First up, with leveling to begin with, the new max level is going to be 60, down from 100. Every level will now give skill points even the whole way up to 60, so we will just have 10 extra skill points from what we currently have in the live servers starting next season, which is pretty huge. As well, Paragon point progression will be done separately to level, so they have refocused this system entirely. This is going to be a little bit easier to explain after talking about some of the other things first. As well then, they talked about profane mind cages as a concept that was really well received with Helltides in previous seasons, increasing enemy level to increase player rewards. So that is just now becoming the basic system that applies to pretty much all activities coming in the new season and beyond. They are really trying to just sort of spread the idea of enhanced difficulty through player choices in exchange for more rewards. The new progression system's goal is to sort of even out progression so that everything is relevant at every stage of the game. Currently, things like world bosses and Helltide lose their use after a certain stage on live servers, but now there will be 8 different difficulty tiers, 4 that are expected to be used up to level 60 and 4 for the endgame. All of this is actually going to be based around pit tiers, with the difficulty scaling of every tier being related to current pit tiers. Normal difficulty is no pit tiers, expert difficulty is pit tier 15 equivalent, and then when you hit max level you will unlock pit itself, and as you complete higher pit tiers you unlock world difficulties that match those tiers. Tier 20 unlocks Torment tier 1, and every 15 pit tiers above that is the next difficulty tier unlock, up to Torment 4. As you enter these new world tiers, the rewards will go up as well, and so the idea is continual progression that truly matters past hitting max level, and keeps things like Whispers of the Dead and Helltide scaling far further into endgame than they currently do. They're also completely rescaling the Artificer's Pit activity, but the idea is just that there will be much harder versions of every content in the game than there is right now, and all of them will be equally more rewarding for the extra difficulty too. Rather than being a direct representation of progression like world tiers are right now, difficulty tiers are going to be more of a player choice feature with actual meaning on every stage of what you do. Another example of how this works is the ladder bosses, which now will scale purely with the difficulty tier you select. They cost the same materials and amount of materials no matter what tier you are in, so you can save these for as late a tier as you want, and every tier has better drops than the last. And again, across the board the idea is more challenge, more reward, and just simplifying some of the more needlessly complex systems, honestly. Past this, they reworked the way that monsters work by changing how monster scaling is done to be done by a specific enemy type, so that elites like the Desecrator should never be able to just completely break as happened in this season. As well, monsters will no longer have level variance from you. They will always have the same level as the player, and difficulty will instead just be done through these difficulty tiers themselves and certain activities. As well, they've lowered the amount of just like big singular hit kill abilities from monsters, and they've also lowered the boss HP at the higher end, so there shouldn't be any more like 8-minute boss kills at the end of 2-minute pit runs. Just more consistency is the main goal there. As well, as a result of all of these things going on now, there's going to be a big number squish so that things like player health, damage, armor, numbers like that are going to actually be smaller, and so they'll actually make sense to look at rather than just like an uncountable number of zeros that you couldn't even read as a number before it disappears off of your screen. This doesn't mean that we're going to be weaker, because monsters will also have their numbers squished as well, so it's going to be equal between us. Past that, then we have changes to itemization in general. Item power levels are going to be adjusted as a whole. Most items you find at max level will be 750 item power, and the biggest of these jumps along the way will be from level 50 up to level 60. Ancestral items are now special drops over the natural limit of 750 item power, and these will always be 800 item power when they drop. These can only be found in Torment difficulties, getting more common in higher difficulty tiers, but intended to stay rare rather than just being like every single drop. Ancestrals aren't a thing that is just assumed as you progress anymore, they're actually an RNG cool drop mechanic even in the endgame. An important part of these too is that Ancestral gear always drops with 1 greater affix guaranteed. They're the only items that can have greater affixes in the first place, and they can have more than one like the current system works, but having one is guaranteed. They have their own increased affix effect brackets on them too, which makes them really good even if the greater affix doesn't hit the stat that you want. They gain 2 tempering slots, and non-ancestrals only get 1. They can be masterworked up to rank 12, and non-ancestrals will only be able to be done up to rank 4, and they will also have stronger versions of things like legendary aspect effects 2 or unique effects 2. They also mentioned to make this feel good, they made the aspects gain power for ancestrals, rather than the current scaling just reworked to have current max rolls locked behind the new system. As well, there are changes coming to tempering, mostly just consolidating the categories. Weapon affixes will now always be things that give you multiplicative damage increases. Offensive category tempering affixes will always be additive damage increases, and all of these size and duration affixes have been moved to the utility category, which is honestly a pretty nice choice. Then we finally heard about the Paragon system. Now glyphs have a new maximum rank of 100 up from 21, which honestly in itself is insane, but this is on purpose to match things like pit tiers, and this is because the Paragon system as a whole is changed. A glyph that is level 2, level 46 or above becomes a legendary Paragon node. This gives you a second radius increase on top of the one that we get on live servers, and they will always unlock a multiplicative stat bonus 2 for the glyph, with the example being 21.6% bonus crit damage on the spirit glyph, which is honestly pretty massive. Glyph upgrading has also been moved from being done in Nightmare dungeons to being done within the Artificer's Pit, so that's a pretty massive change in itself, and the upgrade system has also been changed pretty dramatically. Rather than guaranteed experience, it is an RNG chance dependent on success and difficulty tier. If you are doing a pit tier that is 10 levels above the glyph's level itself, it is a guaranteed level up. If it is 20 tiers or more past your glyph, you get bonus ranks as well, but anything less than 10 ranks above you has an RNG chance of success or failure. Again, the general theme here is more options for higher challenge and higher reward if you beat it. This also lets them refocus the way that Nightmare dungeons work too, so people will care less about just speed farming them for glyph XP and running past all the actual monsters. As for the rest of the Paragon system, then, Paragon points are now gained through experience like they currently are, but you will generate them just basically separate from skill points all the way from level 1. You won't be able to use them until you hit level 60, but you will unlock the ability to use the ones that you've already collected when you get there. You can use these Paragon points that any of your characters have collected all together for every character on the realm, meaning all of your seasonal softcore characters or all of your eternal softcore characters will share the same number of Paragon points. Obviously, seasonal and eternal are separate, and softcore and hardcore are separate. The main idea being that your alts will easily be able to use their Paragon the second they hit max level, and they will match the Paragon progression of your other characters. To sort of fit in with all these changes as well, they are increasing the maximum number of Paragon points that you can get to 300 up from the current 200, not counting the renown bonuses of course. To counter this, you will now only be able to have 5 Paragon boards equipped at a time, which is actually a massive drop from what we're currently seeing with a lot of the best current builds, and it does seem a bit limiting at a glance at least, but they are reworking the boards in general, so we'll have to see how these actually shake up. And I should note that they're adding a new Paragon board for every class as well, and we'll go over the legendary nodes for those later on too. Speaking of which, we talked about the absolutely mammoth class changes that are coming as well. This is a lot of balanced stuff, but I'll try to keep it to the sort of highlights here, starting with things that will affect everyone. Ultimate skills can now have skill ranks like all other skills, gaining damage and cooldown reduction per rank that you take, which is honestly a pretty neat little bit of extra choice to make ultimate skills matter much more than they usually have on the live game. Past that, we have class-specific changes, and guess what? There are new skills coming for everyone in 2.0 to go along with our new raised max skill point cap 2. Barbarian specific changes we'll start off with here, and guess what? Mighty Throw is Barb's new ability here. This throws your weapon at the enemy and then does damage over time on the floor where it landed. There are also upgrades for it like any other skill, increasing attack speed after throwing the weapon, and then choosing between barrier gain and extra pulses when swapping weapons, or one that gives you stuns on this effect too. There are also a number of new passives. Barbed Carapace is a key passive that boosts the hell out of your thorns dependent on the fury that you spend, and as someone who loves thorns as a stat, this is honestly awesome. I love a full thorns key passive concept, and I love that Barb has this now. There's also the new legendary node for the new Paragon board, Force of Nature. This makes earthquakes spawn dust devils and adds a multiplier double dip with damage against close enemies with earthquakes. Also some other smaller passives, bonus ultimate skill damage, fortify when casting weapon mastery skills, and damage increase after damaging with a basic skill, which is really fun. There's also a new unique, the Ugly Bastard Helmet, which converts all damage into fire damage while you're berserking, and honestly, that's sick in itself. It also makes Wrath of Berserker make you explode. There's a new aspect that makes Charge do fire damage too, and a new aspect that makes Steel Grasp and Iron Maelstrom do bonus physical damage. Then we have changes for Druid, starting with their brand new core skill, Stone Burst. This is a targeted channeled cast, the radius growing in size the longer that you channel it. This looks awesome. I love the concept for this skill personally. The enhancements are increased damage for the initial opening hit, attack speed while channeling and after it ends, or increased spirit cost for a bunch more damage, which will probably be the highest scaling version of the skill in the endgame. There's a new key passive as well, one with nature, and this is entirely built around boosting your companion skills. The new Paragon legendary node is also companion focused, giving you +4 ranks to companion skills for 5 seconds after casting a companion skill, and honestly that's just really awesome. Then just a bunch of new passives, the cool ones being bonus damage after casting an ultimate, bonus damage while in human form, and increased damage after casting a defensive skill. The new unique is Stone of Vehement for the new core skill, giving you damage reduction while casting and after the skill casting ends. This gives you a bunch of bonus damage as well for the final explosion of the skill, depending on how long you channeled it beforehand. Then we had a number of new aspects being added too for legendaries, more even than the other classes because the new skill is a core skill, which means that it requires more aspects to help it function, Anticline Burst for bonus damage and starting at maximum size when above 100 spirit casting the skill, and Shattered Defenses for a damage taken debuff applied to enemies that are hit by stone burst damage, increasing the damage they take from all of your other skills. So basically turning it into your utility and your setup rather than being your main damage itself. There's also the Rabid Beast aspect, which makes crits during Grizzly Rage apply Ray Beast to enemies, the Stormcrow aspect that makes Ravens deal lightning damage and speed up the damage application of the active spells too, as well as stunning enemies that are inside of it, the Agile Wolf aspect, which gives a 4th attack to the Shred combo, dealing a ton of damage and knocking enemies down too. Moving on, then we have Necromancer. The new skill is an ultimate called Soul Rift. This does damage to nearby enemies for 8 seconds after casting, giving you essence, barrier, and life regen as a result, as well as max life as it does the damage too. The upgrades give you increased damage for each soul that you collect from enemies while this is active, and this also makes it apply vulnerable as well. And then there's a new key passive, Affliction. This makes enemies take bonus damage from you and your minions if they are vulnerable, crowd controlled, or affected by shadow damage over time effects. If you apply a curse skill to an enemy with this actual debuff on them, it will do damage, scaling upwards with your damage to crowd controlled, vulnerable, or shadow damage over time effect stats. So a curse scaling damage effect key passive. The new Paragon legendary node for Necromancer is Frailty, making cursed enemies take bonus damage from you and your minions too, increasing for each second that the curse has been applied. There's also new passives including increased damage after casting an ultimate, lucky hit chance to gain barrier, bonus damage to elites while fortified, and just a general lucky hit increase passive. The new unique for Necro is the Unmaker helmet. This boosts your new ultimate skill, increasing the duration depending on the essence that you spend, and increasing the damage that it does depending on the essence that you gain. So essentially just an item built to let you fully work around Soul Rift and the cooldown reduction for it. Then some new aspects, Reaping Lotus makes Sever no longer return, but instead split. Fell Gluttony makes the Golem active, erupt with physical damage, and consume corpses to reduce its own cooldown, and then the aspect of Phasing Poltergeist for bonus explosions when Bone Spirit goes off for a bunch of bonus damage with Bone Spirit, which was already an insane build. Honestly, this is just hilarious knowing how good it already is, but it makes a lot of sense considering everything's going to be shifted balance-wise going into this expansion. Then we have Rogue, whose new skill is Dance of Knives, an agility cutthroat skill, and it's actually a channeled skill too, launching knives at nearby enemies, and the length that you can channel it depends on the charges that you have, making this a super unique skill in the way that it functions. The enhancements are charges gained as you move while channeling the skill, stun grenades when you end the channel, or slow and pierce chance on the knives too. This, for all intents and purposes, is essentially Whirlwind but for rogues, and I have absolutely no problem with that personally. The new key passive is Alchemical Admixture, which increases imbuement skill potency if you have recently done 3 different types of non-physical damage. This double dip scales with your bonus damage with poison, shadow, and cold stats, and this is a really neat sort of unique sort of playstyle for builds that aren't really functioning well on live servers, but could very well be doing so with this active. The new legendary Paragon node is Danse Macabre, which makes mobility and subterfuge skills increase the damage of your next skill by 50% after you use them. The new passives include crit chance with cutthroat or marksman skills, damage after evade, damage reduction after dodging, and ultimate skill damage increase. The new unique is Pit Fighter's Gull, which makes smoke grenade give you a bunch of bonus crit damage multiplier and gives you stealth while standing in the radius once per second, which is quite a neat little addition. The new aspects are Star Shards for Dance of Knives to basically just give it a ricochet chance, Poisonous Clouds, which makes you emit poison damage whenever you enter stealth, and Splintering Shards, which makes killing frozen enemies fire out splinters of bonus cold damage. Then finally for classes we have Sorcerer, who gets the new skill Familiar. This summons a conjuration that matches the element of your last used skills. The enhancements make this one completely change how this interacts based on the type of familiar that they are, as well as even one that makes it progress sequentially through familiar types rather than being a thing that you control as the player, which honestly sounds like a really cool concept in itself. I love this skill from the sound of it at least especially as you can have up to like 6 of these at a time. The new key passive is Enlightenment, which makes skill usages give you stacks. You get bonus stacks if you change elements in between skills. At 100 stacks, you lose 5 stacks per second, but gain damage, mana regen, and attack speed while the Enlightenment buff is still active. And the interesting part of the wording to this, to me at least, is that it sounds like a challenge to actually ask you to try and reach permanently active Enlightenment, having so much attack speed that you can gain these stacks faster than you lose them once the effect is running. The new legendary Paragon node is Fundamental Release, which stacks a damage increasing debuff on enemies for each element that you hit with them, and then the new passives give you Barrier each second, damage reduction with barrier active, damage increase per skill of one singular element equipped, and just a general cooldown reduction passive. The new unique is the City Bindings, which affects Familiar, making it summon all 3 elemental variants at the same time with every cast, and increasing its duration, but also reducing its cooldown while lowering the maximum charges down to only being 1. The new aspects are Overheating for bonus critical damage with Incinerate after channeling it for 2 or more seconds, maintained if you start casting again before the window ends. Charged Flesh to make charged bolts pierce and apply bonus damage, and Elemental Constellation, which makes you conjure elemental daggers that attack and pierce nearby enemies, and scales damage with the amount of skills of one element that you cast. That's the end of class-specific changes then, but patch notes are also coming out soon for the PTR, which will have a lot more information too on the less exceptional or notable changes if you want to get into the nitty-gritty. Then past this, we have 2 brand new Mythic unique items, the Shroud of False Death, which gives you stealth and movement speed if you haven't attacked in the last 2 seconds, which is very interesting but probably quite limited or niche, though the inherent effect of this gives you +1 rank to all passives, which is extremely ridiculous conceptually. Then Air of Perdition for a 60% multiplicative damage increase, and if you are playing near someone else who's also wearing the same helmet, you can actually take their multiplier as you kill enemies and stack it on top of yours. Whoever kills more enemies gets the full bonus of both of yours put together, which is honestly quite cool of a concept for something like the Dark Citadel, the new endgame activity, letting you stack all of your power onto one single member of your group if you want to basically turn them into a raid boss. Moving forwards, there are 2 main things that we are talking about here, and first is the quality of life changes that we'll breeze through pretty quickly. The main things here though are new inventory tabs for things like dungeon keys, socketables, and a new stash tab as well being added to the regular stash. Just a general bit of an inventory overhaul, which seems quite good too. Again, nothing is perfect with the inventory yet, but it gets better every time that they mess with it. In dungeons, these sort of intermission events have all just been removed and replaced with just having more monsters in those areas, so that's honestly quite great. And they've just done some UI updates too. The final thing then that is going to be specific to people who have bought Vessel of Hatred and will only be acquirable within the Vessel of Hatred areas, so it's worth mentioning that actually everything before this you get whether you got the expansion or not, but if you do, one of the new mechanics is, well, a returning thing, Runewords from Diablo 2, but of course reworked into the way that would function in Diablo 4 with the rest of our mechanics. The general idea of this is another way for us to increase the power of our items, giving more of a progression path to these that can sort of just create a really sort of batshit way of customizing and maximizing our builds, hopefully changing up even previously established builds in a lot of ways. There are runes of ritual and runes of invocation. A rune of ritual is an example of a thing that you have to do, such as cast a skill with a cooldown. An invocation rune is the effect that happens when you activate it, such as gain crit chance for 5 seconds up to 25%. Now when you cast a cooldown skill, you will gain a stacking crit chance buff, and that's the basic description of Runewords coming into Diablo 4. There's a secondary mechanic to this called offering and overflow though. The bigger the ask from a ritual rune, the higher the offering it will give you. The greater the bonus from the invocation rune, the greater the offering that will be required to activate it. If your ritual rune's offering exceeds the invocation rune's requirement, then you will get what's called an overflow bonus. In this specific instance, it would give you 2 stacks of the crit chance bonus every time you use a cooldown skill rather than just 1 because of how much you exceed the actual requirement. You can only put runes into items with 2 gem socket slots, so your chest, your pants, your 2-handed weapons, and helm, now in 2.0, will be 2 sockets as well. You can only have 2 rune words equipped across all the slots as well, it's worth mentioning, so no, Barbarian doesn't get bonus slots for rune words. You also can't use the same rune twice in your same set, you have to use different runes, and they will be stored in the new socketable inventory tab rather than taking regular inventory slots. The main place to farm these in the expansion will be the Curast Undercity activity in the expansion, and there's also class-specific things in this too, Like a rune that causes earthquakes for Barbarian was another example given. A rune that lets barbs cast Druid's Petrify ultimate, by the way, is really awesome because Runewords will let you cast skills from other classes in a limited fashion. But this is still an insane thing to be able to mix. This lets all classes get things like Teleport, Warcry, which means any class can enter Berserking now, Vortex, Stealth, Decrepify, or Petrify. And while this has a lot of incredible synergy potential, letting you mix multiple classes' designs together a little bit, but they also said if you use a rune word to cast a skill native to your own class, it will actually do even sillier things. It will be stronger if it's one from your class. This is going to honestly completely rework how builds look in Season 6. The gameplay as a whole for every class is going to change pretty massively with all this, and honestly, I'm just personally really pumped to get my own hands on it myself. On top of that, runes and crafting with them will create another avenue for Mythic Unique creating too, as you can mix these with Resplendent Sparks as another method of crafting them. Then the final thing, there will be a PTR for the 2.0 update. It is coming next week. It will carry over your main account progress, your characters will be copied, and there are two different phases of testing that will be coming. The first one is for fresh low-level characters, happening from the 4th to the 6th of September. Then the second phase for more endgame will continue from the 6th of September and onwards after that. There's going to be a vendor in Kyovashad that you can use to give you a bunch of fun stuff to boost you up and help you test various things a bit better, giving literally all of the legendary aspects, all the Paragon glyphs, the legendaries, the uniques, runes, tempers, everything like that, and all your tempering as well, to just let you test with no limits at all. That just about does it for today then, everyone, just condensing down a massively long stream to the best and most important bits, as best as I can at least, so you don't have to watch the full thing to know what's going on. Personally, I am really looking forward to these changes. They're pretty much all very positive, at least to me, but really I want to get my own hands on with it so I can feel with it myself in actual gameplay. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and of course, let me know your own thoughts down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.